Hello and welcome to Control Delete Tutorials. I want to start off by saying that besides this tutorial and what it's about a year ago I posted the video you see here, Autodesk 3ds Max creating a PC. Now I labeled it as part 1. I realized the other day that I labeled it as part 1 and realized it's probably about time that I make a part 2. So that's what we're going to be covering in this video, which means I'll have to rename this to part 1. So we can actually see that. But in the video I covered making a PC monitor and fairly low poly, just kind of showing some different tools in 3ds Max to get people kind of used to the workflow for making something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with a new project. Now I've already gone ahead and collected some references for what I'm going to be creating to explain how I'm going to approach this. So for the full PC, we've already got the monitor, so I'm going to do a mouse, and I'm just going to do a wireless mouse, and maybe if there's time I will show you how to kind of easily create a cord for that. But we're just going to focus on just doing the basic shape of this mouse. And then we have the PC's tower or case, and then we have the keyboard. And I'm actually going to start out with the keyboard. And I'm not going to, normally I would want to bring these references into 3D Studio Max. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to show you how I would approach modeling this and kind of explain with Photoshop the way I look at making segments for the thing that we're going to model. So let's say I start out with a simple box shape in 3ds Max, and I want to know like how many segments should I have on this object, because if we go over to Max and I create a box and kind of going to eyeball the size here, so I'm going to say if I had to look at the keyboard that's in front of me or a typical keyboard, I would guess that it's probably somewhere right along, let's say 18 inches wide. So we're going to work a little bigger. So I typically want to work big, and then I can kind of scale back. So I'm just going to take all my numbers and kind of multiply them by 10. So I have my width and the height that I have here. So if I'm saying it's relatively 6 to 7 inches, I'll just make that, let's go a little short on, whoops, 50. That looks about right. And then as far as the height, I'll make that, say, we'll go 5. Alright, so I have this box. Now I can add a number of segments in here. Let's go ahead and change the color so it's just easier to see the wireframe here. And how many segments do I end up putting on this? Do I put 10, or how many do I put across? Do I want to make millions of polygons here and extrude out every one of these? Typically no, I don't want to work that way. So I'm going to right click on the spinners here and just set these back to 1. And I'm going to go back over into Photoshop and show ways that you can kind of try to figure out how many polygon segments you want to start with. So first I can see on this one that I have these rounded corners. Now I'll go ahead and show you how I would approach making those. So to do the corners, the way I'm going to approach doing that is I'm going to give myself a ruler line here. So if you don't know how to get your rulers up in Photoshop, it's just going to be Control R. Just brings that up just so you can see that. And I'm just dragging these down to give you an idea. So I'm going to start right before this curve, and I'm going to drag another one down to the end of this curve. I'm going to do the same thing, going the opposite directions here, kind of like so. Okay, so that's going to give me where the rounded parts will go. And I do that because I don't want to have a bunch of polygons here just to round that out. I have other ways I can go about rounding, and I can do that after. So then the other parts are where my segment's going to run to put my keys and things like that in. So the way I'm going to separate these is I'm not going to give an edge for every single key. That's going to be too insane to do. Plus these are holes in our mesh. Let me drag that back off. And so I'm going to create these holes. So the way I like to do this is I'm going to drag basically what would be a segment right in the middle of these. And I'm going to do the same thing this direction. So I'm not doing it right along the line there, and the reason I do that is because I'm going to end up using a inset for that. So I'm just going to split. I don't know why I'm being so precise. I don't really need to do that. So I'll segment that one there, one there, one for the number pad, and that gets me pretty close to where I want to be for those portions. So let's see. That should give me everything. Yeah, that's basically going to give me everything I need. So not including the ones that are going to be on the very edge. So we'll go ahead and put those there just so you can see kind of what that looks like. Okay, so those are going to be like the very edges of my box. So in my width segments, now a segment is basically the section. How many sections do I have here? So it's not the edges themselves. So I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So let's hop over to max and we'll go ahead and put that in. So I'm going to say width segments. I'm going to type in 8. And it's going to divvy them up, evenly. So we'll have to move those around afterwards. Now, going downward, we have 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we'll just go to our length. I'm going to type 4. Okay, so that's going to give us our starting point. Now I'm not going to add any to the section here at the top. And if you end up making a keyboard where some of the keyboards are like rounded at the top, so what I would do is I would round that top part off because I'm going to have this segment here, so I can do that after the fact. So maybe I can show that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the top view, and I'm just going to go ahead and just move my object to 0 by right-clicking on the spinner to set these at 0. I like to work around the origin, so that's just kind of a habit thing for me. So I'm going to right-click and convert to editable poly. Okay, go ahead and change my name here to keyboard so as to not confuse it with all the other things that are in my scene right now. Alright, so we're going to go to edge mode, and we're going to double click on the edges that we want to move so that we can move the entire edge loop. So our edge loop, if I double click this, circles all the way around our mesh and connects back to wherever I've clicked. That's a loop. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to my top view, and we saw that the rounded parts at the top and bottom were separated and pretty close to the bottoms here. And then I've got another section here right along the middle. So we'll do that. And if we look at the distance here, let's just make it so the part that I'm going to have here is going to be pretty close to a square. So that way I'll know kind of what I have key related. So I'm just going to bring that up, and then I've got my sections here that I'm going to use for my corner. So again, I want this to be a square shape as close as I can get it. Just kind of eyeball that until it looks square. That's where my rounded corners will be. Let's bring that over, and again eyeball it to where that looks kind of square. And then I'm going to drag this one over to where this part is pretty close to square, so that's where my escape key is going to go. And then I've got 3 sections here that are relatively the same size, and then one that's a little smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up. And something that I just noticed looking at this, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a gap. If we look here, I'm going to have, let's see, I should be okay. I'm going to go to vertex mode, and we'll see. I think I'm going to be one short. Let's see. So I'll give myself what looks to be about 4 of these wide, because those are going to be those keys. So I'll move that group there. And I want to get these as close as I can kind of get. If I use my grid, I could kind of get a better idea. Okay, so this one's kind of almost splitting this one in half. Maybe I'll just kind of move that over a little bit, just so we're a little closer there. And I'm going 1, 2, 3 spaces there. So if I kind of keep that numbering up, 1, 2, 3, that's pretty close there. And then 1, 2, 3. So it'd be 1, 2, 3 there for that space. And then I have a narrower space, and then another wide space. So these need to be spaced out a little bit better, just because I can already tell I have way too much room over here. Now this is where it's good to have the reference already in, so we don't have to worry about that. So now I'm going 1, 2, 3 and a half. So these ones kind of line up there, and then that gets me pretty close to 1, 2, 3 and a half there for where my number pad will be. So that should be pretty close to what I want to have happen. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and save that, just so I know that I have it. And so I'll just go ahead and save this here with my monitor. So I don't want to save over my monitor, so I'm just going to make a new file, and I'll just call this keyboard. And I'm going to make these in separate files, and then I'll show you in the final video how to merge all of them together. And if you don't want to wait around for that video, I do have another video where it just shows how to merge Max files together. So I'll click Save. Okay, so now looking back at my reference, I've got a hole here for the key, escape key, and then I've got the holes for my function keys, and then for my other ones. And then I've got this section here, which is basically that's the section from the escape key over. So I'm going to make those inset parts right now. So I'm going to go into polygon mode, and I'm going to first just create the one for my escape key. So the tools that I'm going to be using are going to be extrude, bevel, and inset. Those are going to be the main ones. So the way inset works, I probably said this in the monitor video, so if you're watching that one first, if you go back to it and you're kind of starting this and I'm repeating things, I'm just doing that in case, I don't always remember what I did, and that video was 11 months ago. So I'm going to go to the inset settings. Okay, and let's go. So the number I'm typing in here may not be exactly what you have, so I'm just kind of eyeballing the space that I want here. So I can click on the spinner here and change this. So I'm just going to type 1.5 for mine. I'm going to hit the check mark to finish off that tool. And then what's nice is if I select all of these, I can inset them separately. So if we go back to the reference, let's make sure we do not select that last one there. Okay, only those. So now when I do inset, see, I don't want it to inset all of them together. So where it says group, I'm going to change that to by polygon, and it's going to do them all individually. And it's going to use 1.5, which is what I used here before. Okay, so that makes that nice. Alright, so then I've got the section here where my keys are going to go for my keyboard. So remember, those are going to go where the escape key is all the way over to my function keys. So I will inset those. I'm going to switch this back to group. That way it does them all together. And I'm going to just use the same spacing for this. It might be slightly different, but all of the keys that you guys make are actually going to be different. So I've done one thing on purpose. I'm going to say it's on purpose. I actually did it on accident, and maybe some of you have already noticed, hey, Jason has left this spot here where he doesn't have any segments. That's fine. I'll show you how to fix that. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. I forgot to put in the fact that there's a subdivision between these two. So what I mean by that is I forgot a section here, and I need to have that. Now I could do this one of two ways. I've already kind of got my spots kind of separated, so I could either cut here and cut here. So if I wanted to make sure that I have the right number of segments. But there's another issue that I have. The arrow keys aren't just a box that I can extrude or cut away. It's got this section here that comes down. So if I really wanted to do this justice, I might have to add some more segments in here and right here to give myself something a little closer to here. So if I was going to do that, I would just end up moving this down. But just for now, we're going to stick to the same way that we've done this before, and we'll make the adjustment after the fact. So I'm just kind of splitting the difference between here and here. So I'm going to add in what's called a swift loop, one here, and then the ones going down. So let me show you what that looks like. So come back, and the first one is going to be pretty much the distance between here and here. So it's going to be about halfway, and this one will be halfway between those. So the tool we're going to use is Swift Loop, and you can see the tool here is going to show me where that loop is going to run. So I'm going to go to my top view just so I can exactly see where the center is here. So I'm going to hit that, my loop gets cut in, and then I have my two here, so one there, and I'm going to just go to edge mode real quick and double click these, kind of get them a little closer to these three boxes being a little closer to even. Now, I'm not worried about the fact that this one kind of cuts down. It's doing that because of the inset. If it really bothers you, I can either go to my scale tool and just scale this flat in one direction, in my X direction, or if I double click this, I can go to Make Planar X, and that will automatically flatten it along the X. Now this only works if I've made this object in the top view or in the perspective view. If I started my box in the left view or front view, my coordinate system is going to be messed up to where this X doesn't actually work properly. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so there's going to be my segments that direction, and I had said that I'm going to also swift loop this one in the middle, and that should give me where my keys are going to go. But what I'm going to do is I'm still going to keep my inset of these. So I'm going to select this area, so it's going to be where my insert, home, page, those keys are. So I'm going to inset this box first, and I'm just going to keep the same amount that I had before. So inset should be still at 1.5, and I'm going to inset this section as well, just so my keys for along here line up properly. So I'll just do inset, and then this gives me where those keys will be kind of edited a little bit. And I'm just going to take, actually I'll just take the whole edge loop here. I'm just going to move this up a little closer, and I'm going to go to vertex mode here and just make this section just a little wider, just so these are a little closer in size. Alright, now I've got my number pad, so that's the section here. Inset all of it together, and I hit the check mark. Alright, so that gives me all of the sections that I need to inset. Now all I need to do is extrude. So all I need to extrude is where my number pads are going, where my arrow keys are going, where my insert and page up, page down, those type of buttons are going, where these three are, where my function keys are, where escape is, and then finally where all of my keys are going to go for my keyboard. There we go. And I'm holding control so I can continue to click and select here. Alright, so now we need to extrude this down. So I'm going to just go to extrude settings. And I don't want to extrude up, but the default always sets that to 10. So I'm just going to bring this down in. And let's go negative 1.5 on that as well, just so it matches there. It's not really necessary, I'm just doing that. Okay, so that gives me my recessed areas. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, so save as. I don't want to save over what I've already done, so I'm going to use the iteration save, this little plus button, which will just add a number to my naming here, so it'll be keyboard 01. So now I'm going to create my keys. Okay, so the way I do this is I'm going to create one key and then kind of work from those. So I have to decide, okay, how big is one of my keys going to be? And I'm also going to just select these rows of vertices here and just kind of bring this up just a little bit, just to make these a little closer together. Okay, so my keys, how big are my keys? Well, I know 3 keys fit right here. So I'm going to just take one of the smaller edge loops here. Let's see if we can't get these a little closer together. So that way they're not quite so different in size. I know I'm only moving these a slight amount, but this bothers me. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my key from one polygon here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make one of these polygons become an element. So the way one way that I can do that is I can select this area, I can hold shift, and I can scale this down just ever so slightly. And I'm going to get this clone part of mesh. So I had held shift and I had scaled one polygon, which is going to create the clone part to element. And so if we look at this, this part has been basically detached. So I'm going to hit undo there just so I can get that back to where it was. And now I'm going to use bevel. So bevel is going to allow me to extrude and outline, which outline effectively just is kind of like scale. So I'll bring my extrusion down to where my key just comes up over there. And let's see. Yeah, that should be good enough. I'm fine with that. So I'm going to hit the check mark. Go back to the top view. So now I have this as an element. So I'm going to detach this, and I'm just going to call this key 01. And I don't want to detach as an element, I just want to detach. So I'm going to hit OK, and now that's a key. So you'll notice that the pivot point for this object shares the same pivot point as the keyboard object. So what I'm going to do is go to the hierarchy panel right here. I'm going to say affect pivot point only, center to object. When I do that, my pivot point now moves to where that key is. And that just makes it easier for me to move this object around. So now I'm going to hold shift and I can start cloning this object. So I'll just clone that by 2, so that'll give me 1 and another. I'm going to do these as copies. Okay, that's pretty good. Those look fairly good for their size. I'll go ahead and just copy these 3. So I'll hold shift. I'll drag this over. So now you can see that the size here isn't going to match up properly. And that's okay. That's really nothing to worry about, because I can affect any part of this mesh in any way that I want to. So if I notice that this is way too big, I can go back to my original object, because now I have a point of reference how big the keys are compared to the keyboard. And this keyboard is still pretty low poly, so it's easy for me to go in and just select all these vertices and kind of bring this over, and now that lines up. And I know these are going to remain the same size, so I'll select those by hitting Control, and oops, I'm going to hold Shift and move. I'll line those up. I'll hit OK. I'll go back to my keyboard, select Vertex mode. I'll select all of these vertices, and I'll move that over. So now these are lining up better. So this is the nice thing. I can just make these adjustments and I don't really have to worry about, messing that up. So I'm going to hold Shift and move again. I hit OK. Select the keyboard, Vertex mode. Select this group of vertices. Move that over. And the nice thing is based off of this scale, this should make my keyboard key area also start to become the right size for all the other keys. Okay, so I'm going to copy the escape key over, and once more I'll go back to the keyboard. I'll select these vertices and I'll drag that over. So now that gets me a lot closer to having my keyboard the right size. So now I'm going to create the keys down below here, and these are kind of the easy ones to create. So I'll drag down my one set. I'll hit OK. I don't want to do two in this case because it's going to keep that spacing, so I can just duplicate that from here. And wow, that actually comes out to almost the perfect size, so that's good. Now I have those three selected. I'll just select this one. I'll hold Shift, and so now we can see we've got a little of a scaling problem there. So I'll just move those into place, and I'll come back to my keyboard here, and I'm going to select all of these, and I'm moving these all together just so it keeps everything else in line, so I can see where this subdivision needs to happen. So those can just get that set of edges right there. Okay, and then I'll grab this bottom half and just pull those up. Now the issue might come that I lay these out and I don't have enough space for these. Well, then I'll just move all of these down and move those keys down with it. But this gives me a better starting point. So now as far as my number keys, I've got 4 across, and then I've got, let's go back to my reference here, 4 across, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keys down. So I'm just going to go to my 4 that I have already spaced out here. I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to move these. I'm going to line them up here with these. Get them pretty close to lined up, and then I'll just move them in the X direction over here. So we can already see that my keyboard here, this needs to move over. About there. Okay, so this is where we're going to get some tricky stuff. We have 2 buttons here, plus and enter, that are longer keys, and then we have my 0 key here that's wider. So we'll make the ones going down, and then I'll show you what we can do for the other. So I'll just select these ones. You know what? No, I'll just go ahead and do this. So I'll bring these ones down, kind of line them up with the ones that are here. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 copies. I hit OK. Alright, so there we go. Now I can already see my number pad needs to be moved down. so that it lines up, because those keys are in line with each other if we look at our reference. So they're all in line. So we'll keep that with our one here. So I'll move these keys down, and now I'll affect my keyboard, and this should effectively give me the right spacing that I want. So I'm just going to select everything here, including that part. And I'm just moving everything together. Perfect. Alright, so now that I've done that, we can see that I have a problem here. Well, this 0 key should be wide. So I'll just delete the one next to it. I'll select this one. I'll go to vertex mode. And I'm not scaling on purpose because I'll show you what the difference is. If I scale this, it now distorts the sides of the keys, making them much wider than the other keys. So that's why I'm just going to vertex mode, and I can select this one side and just move it over. And that's pretty close. Alright, so that's my 0 key. And now I can do the same thing. So I'll just take these two, and I'll hold shift and copy them over. And I'll take the first one here. I'll select the vertices on the bottom, and I'll drag that down to where those line up. So that's my plus button, and this will be my enter button. There we go. Alright, all the easy ones are done. So I'm going to go ahead and save my project. Always a good habit to get into. Saving is important. Okay, so I'm going to look at my keyboard again. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 normal sized keys here. So I'm going to go ahead and make those. So I'll copy this one down. I'll line it up here where it goes as a copy. And then I'm going to hold shift, and I'll move this over to where there's just the smallest gap in between the keys. And I'm going to make 12 copies because I need 13 and I've already got one, so I'm making 12 duplicates. And I do it this way because it's going to space them all out nice and evenly. Okay, so that means my last button here, and I could have done, one extra one, which might have been smart to do, because then I just have to make that one wider. So I'm going to clone that one over by using shift and move, and then I'll just take the vertices on this side, and that's going to be my backspace button, so it's a little wider. Okay, so there's that one. So then next to that, I've got in the next row, I have my tab button, which is going to be wider. But next to that, I've got these keys, so not including the one on the end. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, that's great. I have 12 keys that are already here. I'll just use those down below. So we'll go back over to Max. So I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to click all of these. And we can see the ones that I have here. The first normal one, Q, lines up in between 1 and 2. So that's where I'll start it. So I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to move this over, and I'm just going to copy one set of copies, and I'll kind of move this up, and what I might actually do is line these up here and then I'll line them up. Alright, so I have the 1 and 2 key here, so my Q will just be on the other side of that. So let's see, I have 13. Okay, I got one extra here. Alright, so that gives me where I'm going to start my enter key and where my tab key is. So this one I can just hold shift, and I'm going to line this over on the side with the one above it. Go to my vertex mode, and I'll just move that over to where it looks like it has the same spacing. Okay. Now for my enter key, what I'm actually going to do is use 2 keys here. So I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to duplicate this over. Together. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the attach feature here. I'm going to attach this other key. Before I do that though, I'm going to move this over slightly just to give me my spacing here. So I'm going to click attach, and I'm going to select. So I basically was doing a window selection over everything here, and then I'm going to deselect by holding the Alt key here and here. And I'll just hit delete. That's going to remove everything in between. So now what I can do is I can weld these polygons together. So I'm just going to select the 2 here. I'm going to hit weld. They're right now overlapping. And I'm just going to bring my weld threshold up until they join together. Right there. And I'm doing it that way so they meet in the middle between the 2. I'm going to hit check. And now I'm just going to select the other ones and do the same thing. So based off of the threshold, hopefully it won't weld these together here, but we'll see what happens. So I'll do weld, and there. Everything has met in the middle and welded together. And I did that, so now I want to have the lower part of my enter key. Now I'm going to save that for the next row. So if we go back to our reference, we have caps lock is also slightly wider, and these keys are also slightly offset from the ones above it. So I've basically got the same number minus 1, so I should have 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Great. So get out of vertex mode there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And I can see up here it says 11 objects selected. So I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to line these up with the ones here, just so I can see that they're lined up. And then I'll move them back over into place. So these ones, like I said, are slightly offset. Oh, actually my enter key is slightly different than the one that's here. This one, I'm looking at my keyboard that I have in front of me that has the enter key that is kind of fat, and on mine this key is down here on mine. So it's slightly different here, but we'll work off the one that's here. So sorry if that was confusing. So that's actually a fine size for that one. And I didn't really need to weld them together, but like I said, that's fine. I was just looking at the one I had. I could have done exactly the same thing that I did here, but we'll keep that in case we end up needing that. So let's look back at the reference here. So this one is also kind of a wide key, kind of like the backspace. Looks like it might even be slightly wider than the backspace key. So we'll just take our backspace one and hold shift and bring that down. And we'll line that up pretty close. And I'll just go slightly wider. And I'll bring all of these over and kind of line up my spacing here. Alright, so that gives me a key over here on the side, which is my caps lock. So I'll just take the tab key here, hold shift, bring that down. I'll line this up in the Y direction, change to my vertex mode, and just drag that over. Alright, getting closer to having this thing done. Alright, on the next one, shift again, a little bit wider. And I have one on each side. In between that though, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So once again, these are shifted. So shift and drag, and I'm going to just line these up here. And I'll just move these over in the X direction. And these are going to kind of get centered up since my shift keys are a little wider. And I'm just going to hold shift and bring both of these larger ones down. Just kind of eyeball that. And then I'll just go into vertex mode and adjust. So that'll be shift, right shift, and left shift. Alright. And then finally we have 3 buttons, the space bar, and then 4 buttons. And I think we're probably going to just treat these buttons as though they were all about the same size, and maybe we'll just use the tab key as our reference for that, because they're pretty close to that size. So I'm going to hold shift, I'll drag my tab down, and I'm just going to line that up with these keys first, and then I'll move it over. And we'll just start on this side since it's already here. And it looks like we need to bring this down ever so slightly. Well, actually there's a little space there. We're okay. Just give a little bit of space around it though. Alright. So I've got 4 on this side, so we'll drag that over, get our spaces pretty close there, and we need 3 copies on that side, and hold shift and move that over, 3 copies on this side, and then a space bar. So we'll just use this one, hold shift. Okay, go in the vertex mode, and there we go. So there's our keyboard. I'm going to save that, and the final part will be just adding some changes to it. So if we want it to kind of have some different shapes or something like that, we can easily do that. So let me save that. So let's say sometimes on the bottom of the keyboard maybe this part rounds out, or maybe it just rounds out here and then smooths out, or it rounds here. Then we also have the chamfered areas. So I'm going to start with those chamfers. Now we have a couple of different ways we could chamfer. One, we could chamfer all of the edges at the top here so that they have kind of a soft corner to them. And if I wanted to do that, I can just hit Control and click to get all of these edges. to do that. But I want to do the rounded corners here as well. So with that, I can just select each of the corners. So I'm holding Control and clicking. And I'll just zoom in on one of them. There we go. So the tool I'm going to use is chamfer. So if I click on the settings here, chamfer is useful for rounding out edges. It adds segments in. And we have chamfer types. So we have standard, and then we have quad. Well, quad's not going to do me any good in this case. So I'll just switch that back to my standard one there. Okay. Then we have the edge chamfer amount. That's the distance. So if I was going to get these pretty close here, that would round that out. I can add in more segments. And typically what I would want to do is add in segments in a way that I'm going to have an even number here. Because right now what I'm doing is creating what's called an n-gon here, which I don't want to have. And the n-gon is a multi-sided, more than four-sided polygon. I don't want to have that. And usually if I have something like that, I have to figure out a way that I can make it so this isn't going to be a four-sided or a more than four-sided polygon. The other thing I want to do is I want to chamfer these, so you can see I can only chamfer up to the edges that are here. I want to chamfer all the way out to them, and I'm doing that so that way it's going to start curving from that point, which is what my reference was doing. But then I've only got 1, 2, 3, and 4 polygons evenly here. So I'm going to go with 4. 4 is going to be enough. And what I want to make sure is that when I created that chamfer, see how it made those edges on top of each other? Well, I don't necessarily want to have that. So what I'm going to do is go into vertex mode and hit Control A, and that's going to select all my vertices. I'm going to go to weld, but what I want to be careful with is I had changed this before to be a different number. I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything with that. I want this to be a small number. And what I'm looking for is my before number should be larger than my after number. But I should also have both of these being even numbers, because I'm started with an even number, and based on the way I would be welding, I should be left with an even number. So I'm going to hit the check mark. I'm going to go back to my edge. I'm going to select this edge, and now those vertices that were on top of each other should all be welded together. So I checked that corner. The rest of them should also be fine, but doesn't hurt to make sure. Yeah, we look good there. Look good there. All right. So if I want, I can easily, and I should be able to just use the connect function. So let me make sure that works. I'm going to select the two vertices that I want to connect across this n-gon, and I'm going to click. Now, okay. Oh yeah, it did. Okay, just kind of delayed the way it looked. Okay, so that gives me four-sided polygon, four-sided polygon. No longer have an n-gon. I can do that on each side. All right. Click both, click connect, and it draws one right across there. And that's really handy to do. So we'll just do that real quickly on the other ones here. And unfortunately, I can only do these one at a time. Connect. Oh, okay, it was connecting. Yeah, I don't know what it is about 2016. It seems like it has this delay to it, which I'm not really a fan of, these popping up that way. I'd like to see it instantly. It like fades in rather than just popping up and showing me. I'd rather it just pop up. But I don't have any control over that, I don't believe. Unless they've put in an option to turn that off, but I haven't really messed around with that too much yet. So I want to make sure I didn't select anything else. Alright, so that fixes all my n-gons. Now again, if I wanted to bevel this edge some more, if I double click this, double click there, and then I have to go around and get the ones that, so this allows me to select the edge loop, but the loop stops right here. It doesn't continue around because it's now going around two sides of a polygon. Which isn't a loop. So and I want to make sure I select all those. And then I'll go back to chamfer. So I don't want to chamfer that much. So I'm going to just change my settings here. So I only want to chamfer this a little bit, just to give me a nice rounded corner. And that's going to be fine. Okay, so we'll save that. Now if I wasn't talking all the way through this model would take me very little time to sit here and make. But since I'm kind of explaining everything as I go, I don't want you to think, oh, it's going to take me an hour to make every single keyboard I ever make. No. Once you do it and you know how to do it and why you're doing it, it's going to be a lot faster. Alright, the final part, if I wanted to add a curve to the bottom of here, I would do that by selecting the edges that I want to affect, or the vertices that I want to affect. And so I'm going to just select from here over to here. Actually, you know what? Let's say I don't want anything over on this side to be curved. So I'm just going to go to there. So I can select those vertices, and I can put a modifier on just those. So let's say I put something like an FFD 3x3x3. So that's freeform deformation. I have a tutorial where I talk about just modifiers. You can check that out. So notice here under editable poly, I can see that I'm still in vertex mode and that that's carried over to my FFD. I'm going to go to my control points, and I'm going to select my control points here. And you can see if I just move these out, those move out. And now if I convert to editable poly, that gives me a curve. Now if I have more polygons in here, if I go in and I add Swift Loop all these sections, this is going to be a nice smoother curve because I'll have more polygons to do that. I don't have a lot of polygons here because I've been working low. So that's something else to keep in mind. So I'm going to undo what I've done just because I don't like the way it looks, but in case you want to do something like that, that's how you can approach it. Alright. So the only other thing that we would need to do is I'm going to attach all of my keys. So you can see how many keys I have here that I've created. So if I go here, I can see I've got 105 keys that I've made. That's a lot of keys. And I don't want to keep all of those. So what I'm going to do is go to Attach List. And I want to make sure that I'm currently working in my keyboard. So I'll select my first one, scroll all the way down, hold Shift, select my last one, and say Attach. And now all of my keys have been attached to my keyboard. They're all elements still. So if I go to Element Mode, I can still select these as individual elements of that object, which is good. This is handy too because now if I wanted to, say, have my keyboard rotated at a specific degree, I can do that, and then I can put the feet on the back. But for this demo, we're just going to have the flat version of it. And if I hit F4 here, I can turn off my wireframe and go into realistic view. And there we can see some of the shading came on, so I can see a little bit better on what that looks like. And that basically covers this tutorial. So I will be posting another tutorial showing how to, in part 3, create the mouse, and then the final one will be creating the tower. And I think once you have gone through the monitor and the keyboard and the mouse, doing the tower is going to be very easy, and you should be able to kind of figure that out. But Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you do, please give me a like. That really helps me out. If you think someone else might like it, share that with them. And then if you feel like you want to learn some more stuff from me, please check out my other videos and subscribe. Thanks for watching.